Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Lamed Daled, Daf 134 of Masechta Shabbis. Let's do an overview before we begin. At the beginning we start off with just like some kind of preparation on Yom Tif kinds of things, like different healings and all sorts of random stuff. Then we get all sorts of advice from Abaye's nurse. That's basically the first Amud. Then the second Amud focuses mostly on the discussion about washing and bathing a baby before and after the bris, whether it's the first 2 days or the third day. We're going to see machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And then at the end we just get into a little bit about applying wounds and bandages on Shabbos and Yom Tif. Alright friends, so let's jump in. Cool. We're going to begin on Daf Kuf Lamed Daled on the second line of the page. Lo shachak me'erev Shabbos. So the Mishnah had said that if they did not prepare any kumin before Shabbos, like they didn't cut it up, so it says that they can basically break up the kumin with their teeth. So Tanar Rabbanan, the rabbis thought, Dvarim she'ein osin l'milah b'Shabbos, osin l'b'Yom Tov. Things that you cannot do for a bris milah on Shabbos, you can do on Yom Tif. Shochakin la kamun v'torfin la yain v'shemen. You can break up, you can grind up kumin normally on Yom Tif. You don't have to use your teeth. And also you can whisk together wine and oil on Yom Tif. Right, we had said in the Mishnah that you cannot whisk together wine and oil. You can just kind of pour them together. Amalei Abaye Rav Yosef. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, "Mashna kamun b'Yom Tif dechazi l'kedera, yain v'shemen chazinami b'Shabbos l'chole." So Abaye asks Rav Yosef, he says, one second, how come on Yom Tif you're allowed to just grind up the kumin regularly? I hope I'm saying that right. Am I saying that right? Cumin? Cumin just doesn't sound right. Cumin. In Hebrew it's cumin, I think. Or maybe karkom. Okay, so says Abaye to Rav Yosef, how come on Yom Tif you would be allowed to just grind up the cumin regularly, and on Shabbos you would have to use a shinoi, like use your teeth or something? So, well, mistama, it's because on Yom Tif you can cook with the cumin. And therefore, there's no reason why you can't just grind it up regularly. Well, then yain v'shemen chazinami b'Shabbos l'chole, wine and oil you're allowed to use on, if you mix them together, you can use them on Shabbos for a chole. So how come I can't mix together wine and oil? How come the Mishnah says that I would not be able to mix together wine and oil for the bris milah? That is what Abaye wants to know. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, how do we know that you're allowed to mix together wine and oil for a chole? As we learn in the Brisa, ein torfin yain v'shemen l'chole b'Shabbos. Okay, so the Tanakama says that you're not allowed to whisk together wine and oil for a sick person on Shabbos. Reb Shimon ben Elazar mishum Rabbi Meir, but says Reb Shimon ben Elazar in the name of Rabbi Meir, af torfin yain v'shemen, you're even allowed to mix together wine and oil. Reb Shimon ben Elazar pamachas chosh Reb Meir b'Meir. Reb Shimon ben Elazar says that one time, Reb Meir was feeling ill. And we wanted to whisk together for him wine and oil, and I guess he would probably drink it or something. And he didn't let us. We said to him, what, you're gonna just, your words are going to become null even in your lifetime? Meaning, because Reb Shimon ben Elazar had quoted in the name of Reb Meir that you're allowed to mix together wine and oil for a chole on Shabbos, and yet Rabbi Meir himself is saying, no, don't do it for me. So Amar Lanu, so Meir said to us, Afal pisha ani omer kach, v'chaverai omer kach, omrim kach. Even though, sure, I might say that you're allowed to mix together wine and oil on Shabbos, but my friends say that you're not. Miyamai lamila'ani libi lahavar al divrei chaverai. In all of my days, it never filled my heart to transgress the words of my friends. And therefore, if the Tanakama in this Brisa is saying that we don't mix together wine and oil, so I'm not going to want to mix together wine and oil. And the Gemara says, Hu niu demachmir anavshe aval chuliyam mashari. So Reb Meir was just being machmir on himself by not wanting to mix together wine and oil on Shabbos, but he would permit other people to do it, right? As that's, after all, that's his opinion, right? That Reb Meir says you would be allowed to mix together wine and oil. So the question is, as Rashi points out, we say Stam Mishnah Reb Meir. Right? A Stam Mishnah, the Tanna Kama in a Mishnah, is Reb Meir, or at least he would agree with whatever the Tanna Kama says. And therefore, how come, if Reb Meir's opinion is that you would be allowed to mix together wine and oil for Chola on Shabbos, how come he's saying in our Mishnah that you should not mix together wine and oil? So the Gemara answers, Hasam lo bai leka, hacha bai leka. The difference is that in the case in the Brisa where Reb Meir says that you're allowed to mix together wine and oil, that is where, I guess, you don't necessarily need to mix them together that well, to whisk them so thoroughly. Hachabai leka. But over here, when it comes to bris milah, you'd really have to mix together the wine and the oil very, very well. And therefore, that wouldn't be allowed on Shabbos. That even Reb Meir would say that. Hachanami navid v'lo lelech. So the Gemara says, okay, but by bris milah, why don't you, so then just mix the wine and the oil together, but you don't have to mix it together really, really well. Right? Just do it basically, which is what Reb Meir says is allowed. So Hanu de Katana, no same zeh b'fnei atzmo. So the Gemara says, yeah, bidyu. That's exactly 100% correct. If you look at our Mishnah, what does it say? The Mishnah says that if you didn't mix together the wine and the oil beforehand, so you nosen zeh b'atzmo. You can put them in a like a bowl separately and mix them together. Now you can't whisk them together very well, but just pour them both in the bowl, and whatever gets mixed gets mixed. Right? So that's exactly what Meir is saying, is that you are allowed to join together on Shabbos for the bris milah wine and oil. Just don't mix them together super duper well. Okay? Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, ein misanenin es achardo b'misanenes shelo. Also begacheles. Okay, so the rabbis taught that on Yom Tif you would not be allowed to strain mustard seeds in its strainer, nor would you be able to chuck a coal into a whole bunch of mustard seeds in order to sweeten them out. Okay. Abaye Rav Yosef. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, Maishna mehaditnan. Why should this be any different than the Mishnah that says nosim beitza b'misanenes shel chardo? We have a Mishnah that says that you'd be allowed to take an egg and I guess strain it through a mustard strainer. Rashi says that somehow I guess straining it through a mustard strainer makes the mustard seeds then look better or something like that. But the fact of the matter is, how come you'd be, what Abaye is asking Rav Yosef is, how come you can strain an egg through a mustard strainer, but you can't strain mustard seeds through a mustard strainer? So so Rav Yosef answers, Hasam lo mechze kivora, hacha mechze kivora. When it comes to an egg, it doesn't look like it's going to be borer, selecting, because the entire egg is just going to go through the strainer, nothing's going to be left. When it comes to the mustard seeds, there's going to be some stuff left in the strainer, and therefore it's going to look like borer, like selecting, and that's not allowed. Like you're separating the bad from the good, therefore don't do the mustard seeds, but an egg would be acceptable. And we do not sweeten up the mustard seeds by throwing a hot coal into the mustard seeds. But we learn in Brisa also begacheles. But 1 second, we have a Brisa that says that you are allowed to sweeten up the mustard seeds with a hot coal. Lo kasha, kam begacheles shel mateches, kam begacheles shel eitz. So my answer is, it depends what the coal is made out of. If it's made out of metal, well then you'd be allowed to throw it into the mustard seeds to sweeten up the mustard seeds, because the metal, meaning it'll be hot and it might cool down, but it's not going to make a charcoal. It's not going to make coal. However, a coal made out of wood, when you chuck it into the mustard seeds, it's going to make a pecham, it's going to make charcoal, and we don't want that to happen. Therefore, you're not allowed to throw a coal made out of wood into the mustard seeds, but you can throw some glowing hot metal into the mustard seeds. That would be acceptable. Abaye, the Rav Yosef, Maishnami Bisra Agomre. But then Abaye says to Rav Yosef, but how come I'm allowed to chuck meat onto hot wooden coals on Yom Tiv, and even though it's going to make these charcoals. So Amalei Hasam lo Efshar Hacha Efshar. Rav Yosef answered, well, because meat you can't really prepare before Yom Tiv, meaning you can, but it's not going to be as good. Whereas these mustard seeds, it really doesn't make any difference if you prepare them before Yom Tiv or on Yom Tiv, if you sweeten them up with coal, and therefore you should really do it before Yom Tiv. On Yom Tiv you wouldn't be able to use wooden coals, you'd only be able to use metal coals. Amalei Abaye Rav Yosef, Ma'u legabin. Abaye asks Rav Yosef, what about making cheese? Can you make cheese on Yom Tiv? Amalei Osir. Rav Yosef says, no, you can't. Ma'ishna milisha. So Abaye says, well, how come I'm allowed to knead a dough, but I'm not allowed to mix this cheese to thicken it up and make it into cheese? Amalei Hasam lo Efshar Hacha Efshar. He says, look, cooking the meat, kneading the dough and baking bread before Yom Tov is not as good as doing it on Yom Tov. So therefore you're allowed to knead the dough and make the bread on Yom Tov. But cheese, there's really no difference if you do it the day before or that day, and therefore you should do it the day before. You shouldn't make cheese on Yom Tov. But the Nardaeans say that 1 day old cheese is very, very good for you. So therefore there is a difference between 1 day and, let's say 2 days. So Hachi Kamri. So Rav Yosef says, no, this is what they're saying. Even cheese that is 1 day old is good, but 2 days old is certainly good as well. And therefore there really is no need to have to make this cheese on Yom Tov, so therefore you shouldn't make the cheese on Yom Tov. So we say that we do not make this special kind of bandage for a bris milah on Shabbos, right? There was some kind of bandage, almost if you think about like a Chinese finger trap kind of thing, right? Some kind of thing that goes around the penis, and therefore it was shaped like the penis, and if it wasn't prepared before Shabbos, so you don't prepare this kind of special bandage on Shabbos. And then you would just use a regular cloth or rag or something. Amar Abaye, Amar Li'em. So Abaye says that his nurse told him, right, because Abaye was an orphan, so he didn't have a mother or father. So he had this nurse though, and this nurse, we had her also maybe a few weeks ago, or maybe even a month or two ago, but she had all these interesting remedies, right? So here also, I guess she was some kind of nurse, and she would take care of also babies and people, and she knew all sorts of remedies. So Amr Li'em, so Abaye says that his nurse, that his mother / nurse, the woman who raised him, I guess, told him. Now Abaye also grew up, I believe, in Rabba Bar Nachmani's house, in Rabba's house, but maybe over there they were nurses. I don't know. So I chaluk dinuka lifanye lisitra li'iloi duma midbik garda mine v'asi de chros shafcha. Oh, so Abaye's mother or nurse told him that this bandage, this special kind of bandage that they would use for the bris milah, what you would want to do is, right, lisatra li'iloi, right? So lifanya lisitra li'iloi. What you would do is, so at the top of the bandage, right, if you think about this cylinder that kind of goes around the penis, so then the top of it, towards the head, so you would fold it over outside, so that kind of onto itself, so that any threads that might be kind of sticking out of the top of the bandage, you don't want to get stuck in the wound, because if they kind of dries in the wound, well then when you remove it, it can kind of cause, let's say, permanent damage to the top of the penis, and let's just say we don't want that. Why would we? So we want to avoid that. So therefore you can fold it over sort of onto itself, so that at the top of where this bandage is near the wound, there won't be kind of threads that can get dried into the wound. Okay. Ime de Abaye avla kisisa lefalga. So Abaye's mother, right, this nurse, what she would do is she would kind of create some kind of lining inside of this bandage, so that there wouldn't be any threads that could possibly get stuck in the wound. Amar Abaye, hayunuka deleisle chaluk laisi blisa deisle sifsa. Okay, so if you have a child and there isn't this special bandage, so what you can do is, right, laisi blisa deisle sifsa, you can bring some kind of a cloth or a rag, that has a hem on it. What you would do is you would take the hem and you would put it kind of under the wound, under the top of the penis, and you would wrap that around, and that way any of the threads from the hem wouldn't get in the wound, and then the rest of the cloth would kind of be facing upwards towards the top of the penis so that none of the threads would get in the wound. V'amar Abaye, it said Abaye, Amar li aim, my mother/nurse told me, Hayanuka tilo yidia mapakte. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, so if you have this little guy and you don't know where his anus is, I guess it's like not opened. So listen to this little minor surgery. So the shayfe mishcha, so what you do is you rub the little guy in oil, v'lok milah hadayoma, and then by rubbing him in oil, it'll make his skin like somewhat translucent, and then you lift him up towards the sky. V'hecha dezig likare besarta shtiva erev. Yikes. So then where like the skin is kind of translucent, well, that is where the hole is supposed to be. So what you do is you take like a barley kernel, like some kind of, I guess the top of the barley is like sharp, and then you kind of like open up a hole over there. But just don't use a metal knife because that will create swelling. Rather just use like a sharp barley kernel. And then the guy's got an anus. Alright. V'amar Abaye, and said Abaye, Amar li aim, that his nurse told him, Hayinuka d'lo mayitz. What do you do if you have a little guy who's not nursing, he's not suckling? So maker dekar pume, it means that his mouth is too cold. So what do you do? Friends, what do you think you do? If the little guy's mouth is too cold, what do? You heat it up. So, my takante, how do you fix it? Leisu kasa gomre. So you take a cup of coals, velinkatele lahade pume, and you put it near his mouth. The Chaim said his mouth will warm up. The Chaim pume umayitz. His mouth will warm up, and then he'll be able to nurse. V'amar Abaye, amar li aim, hayinuka d'lo menashte. If you have this little guy who's like, apparently he's not like breathing so good. So, l'napafe b'nafvasa umenashte. Okay, so what you can do is you can kind of like fan him with some kind of like a fan, and then he's going to breathe better. V'amar Abaye, amar li aim, hayinuka d'lo me'ave. If you have this little guy also, I think it's some kind of breathing thing. So leisu silyasa deime. So what you do is you bring his mother's placenta, v'lisharke ilave, and you rub it on the little guy. U'ma'ave, and then he's going to breathe real good. V'amar Abaye, amar li aim. Abaye said that his nurse told him, Hayinuka de cotton, if you have this little guy who's like emaciated, he's too small. So laisu the silta de ime. So what you do is you the silyasa de ime. So you bring the mother's placenta, v'lisharke ilave, and you rub it on the guy. Mikudna leulma, from the smaller part of the placenta to the bigger, wider part of the placenta, to kind of like indicate like, even though you're a little guy now, you're going to become a big guy. Even though you're like the little part of the placenta now, you're going to become like the big part of the placenta. You're going to become nice and big. Ve'i alim, and if he's like swollen, like too big, but not in like a healthy way, me'umon lekudna. So then you rub the placenta on the little guy, but from the big part of the placenta to the smaller, thinner part of the placenta, to say you're very big right now, but you're going to become just right. V'amar Abaye, amar li aim. Abaye said that his mother or his nurse told him, Hayinuka de sumak. If you have a little guy and he's too red, well, dakatilo iblabe dama. That means that the blood in his body has not yet been absorbed in his flesh. And the problem is, if you do a bris milah right now, well, he's going to bleed too much and he might die. So lisarchu lei. So what you do is you wait ad iblabe dama v'lemalua. So wait until the blood gets absorbed in the body, and then you do the bris milah and everything will be fine. Diyarok, what if the guy is too green? V'akati, so de'akati lo nafal be'dame, that means that his blood has not yet like developed enough. He doesn't have enough blood in him. He's not strong enough yet. So lisarchu ad nafal be'dame v'lemalua. So wait until he develops more blood and then do the bris milah, because that means that he's strong enough. The Tanya, as we learned in the Brisa, Amr Reb Nosson. Reb Nosson says that one time he went to the cities of the sea. And he says that he reports that a woman came before him. right? That she circumcised her first child and he died, the second child and that one also died. Shlishi, now she had another baby. Heviyasu lefanai, she brought this third baby in front of him, and she was concerned that she was concerned about doing bris milah for this third son because the first two died. So Reb Nassan says that I saw Shu Adam, that he was too red. Amartila, I told her, Amtini lo, wait for this guy, Achivla bodamo, until his blood gets absorbed into his body, and then do the bris milah. So Amtina lo, Achnivla bodamo, umala also v'chaya. And that's what she did. She waited until the blood was absorbed in his body. She then did the bris milah, and the little guy he lived and he was healthy, and he probably became a big tzaddik. Vayukaran also Nasan Abavli al Shmi, and they called this guy, they named him after me, they called him Natan Abavli, Nathan from Bavel. I guess Reb Nassan was in Bavel? Interesting. I guess. It certainly sounds that way. Unless maybe that was like his last name or something. But wouldn't it only be his last name if he actually lived in Bavel? I guess, I don't know. And does that mean that when we say like Reb Nassan Abavli Omer, is that like Reb Nassan? I don't know, it sounds like it. So now Rav Nassan says that one time he went to this place called Kapotkaya, and a woman came to me, Shamal ibn Rishon v'meis, Sheni v'meis, right, that she circumcised her first two kids and they both died. Shlishi, Heviyasu l'fanai, and now she brought her third child to me. Re'isiv, I saw, Shehu Yarok, that he's too green. Hitzatzti bo, v'lo re'isi bo dam, bris. I looked at him and I saw that there wasn't dam, that there wasn't blood, that if you would do a bris, right, he wasn't strong enough and there wouldn't be enough blood in his body. So I suggested that just wait until he develops enough blood in his body that he's healthy. So she waited for him and then did bris milah v'chaya, and the baby lived and they called him Nasan Habavli, which is my name. Okay, new Mishnah. Machitzin es ha'kohen bein lifnei milah ubein la'achar milah. Oh, so the Mishnah says that you can bathe this baby before the bris milah as well as afterwards. Mizalfen olav biyad avalo bechli, and you can sprinkle water on him with your hand, but not with a vessel, not with a kli. The Gemara is going to explain what does this mean, right? Because the Reisha sounded like it was saying you can bathe him, like his whole body, in water, and then we seem to be saying, meaning you can bathe him like in a bath, and then we seem to be saying that you can only be applying, like sprinkling water. So, which one is it? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Machitzin es ha'kohen b'yom hashlishi, shchalios b'Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says you can even you can even bathe the baby on the third day since his bris, if that is on Shabbos. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, as it says by the fellows from Shechem, right? After Shechem raped Dinah, so the brothers kind of told the people of Shechem that, hey, if y'all circumcise yourselves, then we'll become besties, we'll become real good friends, and we'll do business, and everything will be good. So they said, okay, great. They circumcised themselves, and then on the third day, it says when they were in great pain, Reuven and Shimon just took advantage of them and killed them. Okay, so we see that from the third day that was a day of particular pain. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that there is sakana, there is danger for this child, and therefore you can bathe him on the third day, even if it's Shabbos. Suffolk ve'androgynos. If you have a suffix is a baby who's born in the 8th month. The assumption is that a healthy baby is either born in the 9th month or the 7th month, but the 8th month, the baby's considered a nafel. I'm not sure if he's going to live or not. Androgynos, or somebody who has, if I understand correctly, both male and female genitalia. Ein mechal and all of us a Shabbos either for the suffix or for the androgynos. You are not mechal Shabbos to do a bris milah. Rabbi Yehuda matir b'androgynos. Rabbi Yehuda says you can do a bris milah on Shabbos for an androgynos. Okay, says the Gemara. V'ha amar d'reishim marchitzin. What's going on, right? The Tanakama first says marchitzin es ha'kohen bein lifnei milah uvein la'achar milah. Right? The Tanakama of the Mishnah first said that you can bathe this baby, and then it says umizalfen olav biyad avalo b'chli. But then it says that you sprinkle water on the baby. Which one is it? Do you bathe the baby in like a bath of water, or do you just kind of sprinkle water on the baby? So Rav Yehuda of Rabba Bar Avua, Damri Tarvayu. So Rav Yehuda and Rabba Bar Avua say, Ketzad Katani. The Mishnah is explaining yourself. It's telling how do you bathe this child, right? As the pasuk says, not the pasuk, as the Mishnah says, Machitzin es hakain ben lifnei milah ben la'achar milah. That the Mishnah says that you can bathe this child before the bris and after the bris. Ketzad. How do you bathe this child? Oh, well, mizalfin olav biyadav alo bichli. You can sprinkle water on the baby with your hand. Just don't use a kli. Do not use any kind of vessel. So when it says that you sprinkle the water on the baby, that's explaining what it means to bathe the baby, but you would not just do a regular bath. Amar Rava. Rava says, "V'amarchitzin katane." Rava says, but it says in the Mishnah marchitzin, it says to bathe, not just to sprinkle. So what is it, Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Bar Avua are saying that when it says bathe, it really means to sprinkle. That sprinkle is explaining what it means to bathe. Rava says, what do you mean? But it says bathe. Elo amar Rava. Rather, says Rava, hachi katani. This is what the Mishnah is saying. Marchitzin es hakayin bein milifnei milah bein la'achar milah bayom harishon kidarko. That you can bathe this child both before the bris and after the bris regularly, and that is on the first day. And I believe that applies to the second day as well, or at least Rashi seems to be assuming that. Now, if the third day from the bris is Shabbos, well then mizalfin olav biyadav alo bichli. Then in that case, the Tanna Kama would say on the third day you can only sprinkle water on the baby. You would not be able to pour water from a kli. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah omer machitzin es hakaton bayom ashlishi. Whereas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah argues on the rabbis and says, whereas the rabbis say you can only sprinkle water on the baby on the third day, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says you can even bathe the baby on the third day regularly. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, "Vayi bayom hashlishi be'osam koavim," that it was on the third day with the people of Shechem that they were in great pain. So we see that the third day there is sakana, there is danger involved, and therefore you can bathe the child regularly, because the assumption is that by bathing the child is sort of a remedy, and will reduce the danger that the child is in on that day. Tani kavase de Rava, and sure enough, we have a brisa to support Rava. What's his brisa? Marchitzin hakain ben lifnei milah ben la'achar milah bayom rishon kedarko. Oh, so we have a brisa that says that you can bathe the child both before milah and after milah. On the first day, you can do that regularly. Uvayom hashlishi shchalios b'Shabbos, and if the third day falls out on Shabbos, mizalfin olav biyad. Well, then you can sprinkle water on this baby by hand. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah omer marchitzin es hakaton bayom hashlishi shchalios b'Shabbos shchalios b'Shabbos. Whereas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah argues on the Tanna Kama and says that even on the third day you can bathe the child regularly. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, even though I don't have a proof for what I'm saying, that on the third day you can bathe the child regularly, I have a sort of allusion to this. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, "Vayi bayom hashlishi be'osam koavim," that on the third day the people of Shechem were in great pain, and therefore that shows that the third day is a particularly precarious day, a dangerous day, and therefore we can bathe this child regularly on the third day. And then the brisa says that, the brisa concludes that when you sprinkle, you do not sprinkle with a cup or with some kind of a plate or with some kind of vessel, elabiyad, rather you use your hand, and says the Gemara, asan l'tana kama. That last part of the brisa is, of course, according to the Tanna Kama, because according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, you don't sprinkle any water ever, right? It's only according to the Tanna Kama that on the third day you would sprinkle water, and the brisa is explaining that when you sprinkle water, it's not with any kind of kli, it's with your hand. My afapisha ein raya l'davar, zeich l'davar. The Gemara wants to know, when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, I don't have an outright proof for what I'm saying, that on the third day the child is in a precarious situation and you can bathe him regularly. rather I just have an allusion to that. How come it's not an outright proof? So mishum de gadol lo salik bisra heya kain salik bisra heya, because when it came to the people of Shechem were gedolim. They were already adults, and adults do not heal as quickly. And you can argue that is why in the third day in Shechem they were in a particularly precarious situation. However, a baby heals quicker, so therefore you can argue that by the third day already he is not in a great danger, and therefore Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, look, it's not an outright proof that on the third day the baby is in danger. It's more of an illusion. How the also the comment of Rava, there was a certain fellow who came in front of Rava Orile Kishmaite, right? And this fellow asked Rava about, can you bathe a child? How can you bathe a child on the third day? To which Rava said, look, on the third day you're allowed to be mizalfin. You're allowed to sprinkle water on the baby, because he was oh no, sorry. So Rashi says, Orile kishmaite hitilo arechitza kedarko b'yom harishon shchalos b'Shabbos. Exactly. That Rava allowed this fellow to wash the baby regularly on the first day, right? Now, according to Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Bar Avua, on the first day, you would only be allowed to sprinkle water on the baby. Rava, however, paskined, right? This fellow came and asked Rava, on the first day, can I bathe the baby or just sprinkle water on the baby? So Rava said, like his opinion, which is that you'd be allowed to actually wash the baby properly on the first day. And then Ichlish Rava. And then Rava got sick. Rava then got sick. And he said, Omar, why did I get involved with these elders, right? Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Bar Avua were like much older. They were second generation Amoraim. They were students of Rav and Shmuel. They were like much older and sort of higher up, whereas Rava was much younger, and he nonetheless didn't have any problem getting involved and arguing with Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Bar Avua and saying, what do you mean that marchitzin means mizalfin? That means that on the first day you can only sprinkle water. Rather, Rava says, what do you mean? The Mishnah says marchitzin, you can bathe, and therefore he gives his own pshat that it means that you can mamish wash the baby on the first day. Only on the third day it means that you can sprinkle. So now all of a sudden he paskin for somebody that you'd be allowed to, like his own opinion, that you'd be allowed to wash the baby properly on the first day. And then he started feeling unwell. And he said, oh my gosh, it must be punishment. Why did I even bother? What was I thinking by arguing on Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Bar Avua and pasking for this fellow that he's allowed to wash his baby properly, regularly on the first day? Right? Why did I have to get involved in the sort of explanations of these elders? And then the rabbis responded to Rava and they said to Rava, yeah, but wasn't there a brisa supporting you after all, right? We just learned a brisa a few minutes ago which says just like Rava, that on the first day you can bathe the baby properly, and on the third day you sprinkle water. So Amr Lahu, Rava responded to these rabbis, Masnisin Kavasayu Deka. However, the Mishnah is like Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Bar Avua. So while there might be a brisa supporting me, if you really look into the Mishnah, Rava was saying that it supports Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Bar Avua. Mimai, how come midika Amar, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Omer, marchitzin es hakayin bayom hashlishi shechalios b'Shabbos. Because if we look at the Mishnah, it says that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that you can bathe the child on the third day from the bris milah that falls out on Shabbos. Now says Rava, if you would explain the Mishnah as saying that according to Tanakama, even on the first day, all you can do is sprinkle water. Well, then, so they're basically talking about two separate things, the Tanakama and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, right? If you say that the Tanakama is saying that on day one, you can sprinkle the water on the baby, but not bathe the baby properly. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is saying a separate halacha, which is on day 3, you're allowed to bathe the baby. But if you say like me, says Rava, that according to the Tanakama, on the first day you're allowed to bathe the baby properly, and on the third day you're allowed to sprinkle water on the baby, well then Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah should come to say that, and disagree and say, even on the third day you can also bathe the baby properly, right? It should say, af bayom ashlishi marchitzin, right? Meaning, according to Rava, the Tanna Kama also says that you're allowed to bathe the baby just only on the first day, not on the third day. On the third day, you would have to just sprinkle. To which Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would be coming to say, no, even on the third day, you can also bathe the baby properly. But that's not what he says, right? So, hi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Omer marchitzin, af marchitzin mibayle. When it says that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that you can bathe a baby properly on the third day, well, if the Mishnah read like I did, that according to the Tanna Kama, you can bathe the baby properly on the first day, and on the third day you can only sprinkle water, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah should be saying, af marchitzin, that no, it's not only on the first day that you can bathe the baby properly, you can even bathe the baby properly on the third day. But he doesn't say that, which sounds like it's a separate statement, which would sound like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Bar Avua, that the Tanna Kama is saying that you sprinkle the baby on the first day, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is saying a separate halacha, which is that on day 3 you can bathe the baby. Because Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came, Omar Rabbi Elazar, he said the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Pidas, the Amora from Eretz Yisrael. So he said from Rabbi Elazar, halacha Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that you are permitted to bathe the baby properly on day 3, that it is considered a sakana, it's considered a danger. And therefore you can bathe the baby properly on day 3. Havu bab marava, in Eretz Yisrael they asked the kasha, harchatzas kol gufo or harchatzas milah. When we say that the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that you're allowed to bathe the baby on day 3, does that mean that you're allowed to bathe the entire body of the baby, or maybe only the bris milah wound? So, Omar Lu Ahumer Rabban Rabbi Yaakov Shmei. So a certain rabbi, and his name was Rabbi Yaakov, answered, and he said, Mistavar achatzas kol gufo. Makes sense to say that we're talking about bathing the entire body of the baby. Why? Because if it enters your mind that we're just talking about washing the wound, migara mechamen agabe maka, well, I mean, what's the chiddush to say that you can wash just the wound? I mean, you can wash any wound. To Amarav, ein monen chama v'shemen me'agabe maka b'Shabbos. We do not hold back from applying warm water or oil to a wound on Shabbos. And therefore, if you're already allowed to apply warm water and oil to a wound on Shabbos, well, then certainly I should be able to apply it to the wound of a bris milah. So therefore, it must be the Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the chiddush that he's saying is that you're allowed to apply warm water to the entire body of the baby. Maskefler of Yosef asked a kasha on this Rabbi Yaakov who says that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah must be saying that you can apply warm water to the entire body. Says Rabbi Yosef, hey, Rabbi Yaakov, you're forgetting an important point, which is that when Rav says that you're allowed to apply warm water to any kind of wound on Shabbos, that is talking about warm water that was heated up before Shabbos. But our Mishnah, when we're talking about bathing a baby with warm water on Shabbos, it's talking about even warm water that was heated up on Shabbos. That because of the sakana, because the child's in a precarious situation, we can even use water that was warmed up on Shabbos. And therefore, says Rav Yosef, the chiddush of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is that actually it is only talking about the wound of the bris milah. However, the chiddush is that you can apply warm water to the wound, as opposed to on a regular Shabbos you'd only be able to apply warm water that was heated up before Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is saying you can even apply warm water that was heated up on Shabbos. And says Rav Yosef, really it is talking about just on the wound itself, but not on the entire body. Maskefler Rav Dimi. Now Rav Dimi argues on Rav Yosef. Says Rav Dimi to Rav Yosef, how do you know that the machlokas here that they're talking about in the Mishnah is specifically regarding water that was heated up on Shabbos? Maybe it is talking about water that was heated up before Shabbos, and therefore the chiddush of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would be that while in general you would be able to apply warm water to a wound, here you can apply the warm water to the entire body. So Abaye on Abaye de Ishani lay V'kodem v'shani le Rav Yosef. Abaye says, look, I was really looking forward to answering this question, but Rav Yosef answered it first. Mipnei she sakana hu lo. The answer is that, you know how we know that we're talking about water that was heated up on Shabbos in the Mishnah? Because the child is in a precarious situation, he's in a state of danger, of sakana, and therefore you would even be able to use water that was heated up on Shabbos. And Rav Yosef is saying that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the chiddush of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is that you can apply warm water to the wound of the bris milah on Shabbos, even though in general we would not just warm water, but warm water that was heated up on Shabbos, you can apply to the wound of the bris milah, even though in general you would only be able to apply warm water that was heated up before Shabbos to a wound. Itmar was stated by Amoraim. Itmar Nami was also stated, Kiasa Ravin, Amar Rabbi Abaye, Amar Rabbi Elazar, that when Ravin came, he said the name of Rabbi Abaye, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Abaye, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Some say it was Rabbi Abaye in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Halacha, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Bein b'chamun shuchamu b'Shabbos, Bein b'chamun shuchamu me'erev Shabbos, whether it was water that was heated up on Shabbos, whether it was water that was heated up before Shabbos. But then he says, Bein archatzas kol gufo, Bein archatzas milah, mipnei shesakana hu lo. And then he says that it's whether it is the bathing of the entire body, whether it's the bathing of just the wound, because out of sakana. So I guess that, even though it sounded like Rav Yosef disagreed with Rabbi Yaakov's svara in saying that, you can wash the entire body, because he compares it to Rav, saying that then how is it any different than any other wound? But, he was just, he was arguing on Rabbi Yaakov, because he wasn't taking into account the fact that this isn't just like any other wound, because the chiddush here is that it's cham shuchamu even on Shabbos. But but apparently Rabbi Yochanan says nonetheless that you would still be able to wash the entire body, since it is a sakana. Okay. Gufa, we said earlier, Amar Rav, ein monin chaman v'shemen me'al gabe maka b'Shabbos. Says Rav that you are permitted to put warm water and oil on a wound on Shabbos. Shmuel Amar says, Shmuel no sein chutz l'maka v'shoses v'yored l'maka. Shmuel disagrees and he says, no, you don't apply this warm water and oil directly onto the wound, because that would be, shrika samanim. You'd have to be concerned about grinding up, spices for refuah. Rather, what you could do is you could put this warm water and oil outside of the wound, and it'll drip into the wound, and that way it won't be obvious that you're doing it as a refuah. Meisvei, we have a kasha on Rav. Enos shemen v'chamen al gabi moch litin al gabi maka b'Shabbos. We have a brisa that says that you do not apply oil and warm water to a cloth and then apply that to a wound. So we see that you don't put warm water and oil directly on the wound on Shabbos. Rav answers, no, the issue over there is that we're concerned that you're going to end up squeezing out, right, extracting the oil and the warm water from the rag. But over here, you're just putting it directly. There's no issue of schita. Tashma, come in here. Ein nosin chamen v'shemen agabi moch shagabi maka. B'Shabbos, we have a brisa that says that you don't put warm water and oil on a rag that is on top of the makkah, meaning you're not necessarily applying pressure to the wound over here. You're just you have a rag, like a cloth that is on top of the wound, and still you're not allowed to apply warm water and oil. So it sounds like you wouldn't be allowed to put these things directly on the wound against Rab. So no, there are also the issues, once again, they were concerned that you might squeeze out the cloth and extract the warm water and oil from it. That's why it's not allowed. But here, when you're putting the warm water and oil directly on the wound, Rav would argue that it's acceptable. Tanya Kavasi de Shmuel. Now we have a brisa supporting Shmuel. Enosnin chamen v'shemen al gabe maka b'Shabbos, aval nosnin chutz lemaka v'shoses v'yored lemaka. Then we have a brisa that says that you do not put warm water and oil directly on a wound on Shabbos, but you can put it outside of the wound and let it drip into the wound on its own. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Nosnin al gabe hamaka moch yavesh usfug yavesh. You're allowed to put on top of a wound dry, like rags and dry sponge. Ava lo gemi yavesh, but not a dry reed, velo ksisin yavesh, and not dried rags. Kasha ksisin aksisin. The Gemara says, what do you mean? One second, the Reisha just said that you are allowed to put dried rags. The Sefer says you're not allowed to put dried rags. Lo kasha abba chadate abba atike. It depends. If they are new, then you can't put it on the wound because that's l'refuah. If they're older, then it's fine. They're not necessarily going to heal as well. Amar Abaye shmamina hanek sisin masu, says Abaye. Oh, so we see that these new rags have healing properties. Okay, that was Daf Kuf Lamed Daled of Masechta Shabbos. Let us do a recap. So the page started off with like all sorts of like random stuff that you can do on Yom Tiv and Shabbos, such as like grinding up cumin and mixing up oil and wine and using sifters for mustard seeds. Then we got into like a whole bunch of advice from Abaye's nurse about how to apply bandages to the wound of the bris milah, and all sorts of other things about how do you know that, you know, what do you do? You have to, about waiting when the baby's too red or too green, things like that. Then we got, once we got to Kuf Lamed Daled and Abaye, we started discussing the machlokas between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah regarding bathing a baby on the day of his bris milah, on the day after, on the third day. So, according to Rav Yehuda and Rabbi Bar Avua, the Tanna Kama is saying that even on the first day, you can only sprinkle the water on the baby to bathe him, but you can't just bathe him properly. Whereas Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that even on the third day you can wash the baby properly. Whereas Rava says no, the Tanna Kama is saying that on the first day you can wash the baby properly, just on the third day the Tanna Kama is saying on the first day you can wash the baby properly, but on the third day just sprinkling water. Whereas Rabbi Elazar says no, even on the third day you can wash the baby properly as well. Then towards the end, we got into how to apply ointment on the wound, on wounds on Shabbos. Rav says that you would be allowed to put warm water and oil directly on the wound. Shmuel says put it outside the wound and let it drip in. Then we also saw that apparently new rags you would not put on a wound because it has healing properties, but older rags would be okay. Friends, hope you enjoyed Daf Kuf Lamed Daled and hope you enjoy your day. Peace.